Imagine a world where time and space are no longer fixed concepts. Where strange creatures can communicate with us through mysterious messages from the future. Are you ready to embark on a journey full of mysteries? Where inexplicable events are unfolding right around us. Unidentified flying objects are not just aircraft, they are gateways to another world. Where anything can happen. From time being torn apart to messages from extraterrestrial beings that we cannot yet understand. Are we truly alone in this universe? Stay tuned, because the answer may be beyond your wildest imagination. The Cosford Incident, the shocking story. In March 1993, the sky over England was dark and still, with only the light from the stars shining down upon the earth. As if the stars themselves were watching the strange events about to unfold. However, no one could have anticipated that on this night, the sky would witness an event that even UFO experts could not explain. The story began with the Cosford Incident, a wave of strange UFO sightings across the Cosford area, where civilians, soldiers, and witnesses had seen a giant triangular UFO hovering in the sky. However, what no one expected was that these stories were not just coincidences, but part of a mysterious event that UFO researchers are still trying to solve. A man named John was driving down a deserted road late at night. The sight he witnessed would haunt him for the rest of his life. A large triangular UFO with strange, brilliant lights suddenly appeared, hovering in the sky ahead. It was unlike any flying object he had ever seen in his life. The lights emitted from the UFO were so bright that he had to squint. Unable to believe what he was seeing, he even thought he might be dreaming. However, the truth shocked him. He was not dreaming. The UFO was enormous, much larger than anything described in typical UFO reports. It had 3 sharp corners, with red and blue lights emanating from its edges. The air around it seemed to be pulled into an invisible force, creating a tense, suffocating feeling. John was horrified. He couldn't believe his eyes. Is this a real UFO? This can't be happening. But when he looked into the rearview mirror, he realized that his family was sitting behind him, and they were all staring at the UFO in shock. What were they looking at? Something that couldn't be explained? Everyone was panicking, but there was something even more terrifying. The UFO was not moving. It remained stationary in the sky, as though it was observing them. As John tried to push his car forward, a strange sensation made it impossible for him to control the steering. It felt as if a powerful force was preventing the car from moving faster. He couldn't speak. He shouted to his wife and children, asking them to look at the sky and confirm what they saw. But when they looked up, they were all left speechless in awe. The UFO started to move, but very slowly, very strangely. The strange lights it emitted were so bright that the air around it seemed to turn into a strange liquid. One person in the car began to feel a headache. It felt like being pulled into an invisible vortex, as if space and time were being distorted around them. John couldn't resist his curiosity. He continued driving, heading straight for the UFO hovering in the sky. But curiosity was the most dangerous thing in this situation. As he got closer, the UFO suddenly changed direction, moving to the side and disappearing into the sky as if it had made an extremely fast jump without leaving a trace. Questions began to form in John's mind. What was that? Where did it come from? Why did it stop here? Did it have a message for us? All these questions would never have a definitive answer. John knew he had witnessed something that no one could explain, and no theory could provide an answer. Then, in the days that followed, he received strange phone calls from unfamiliar people, all asking the same question. What did you see in the sky that night? But the truth was, what John and his family had witnessed was not the only strange occurrence that night. Another story also took place in Cosford, one involving a local farmer. This man saw the UFO flying very low and almost landing on his field. But what was strange was that when he approached the spot where the UFO had landed, he saw the cows in the field standing in a circle. There was no sound, no movement from them, just their large eyes staring at him. The cows seemed unable to move, as though they were in a hypnotic state. There were no traces of the UFO, no physical marks, just the cows standing still, eyes locked on one another, seemingly participating in a mysterious ritual. The farmer could not explain this phenomenon. He turned back and called a friend. saying, "Something very strange just happened. I can't explain what I just saw." However, all he could do was live with the question, why did this happen? The strangeness didn't end there. The locals began to spread rumors about strange lights in the sky, inexplicable phenomena, and feelings that couldn't be described. But they all had one thing in common: they had seen a UFO. And that night, the Cosford sky was not just a vast space, but a land full of mysteries that humanity had yet to decipher. The story of the Cosford incident didn't just stop at these eyewitness accounts. It raised a series of unanswered questions. Was the UFO that John and other witnesses saw a sign of an extraterrestrial invasion? Or was it just an odd coincidence that science couldn't explain? Perhaps the Cosford incident will remain one of the many cosmic mysteries that humanity will never fully understand. Stories of UFOs and the appearance of extraterrestrial beings will continue to be one of the most debated, fascinating, and intellectually challenging topics for centuries to come. Strangers at the art store. Perhaps the strangeness doesn't come from what we see, but from what we cannot comprehend. It was an ordinary day at a small art store in downtown London. The shop was no different from any other art shop in the city: paintings by famous artists, unique sculptures, and odd decorative objects that made the space artistic and captivating. However, today, this shop witnessed an event that made it the center of a mysterious story. A story that no one could explain. The shop owner, a middle-aged woman named Clara, had run this art store for many years, and she was used to meeting many customers, from famous artists to tourists who loved art. She took pride in understanding her customers' preferences and could usually predict what they would buy. But on this day, a group of very peculiar customers entered the store, creating an odd feeling that Clara couldn't explain. This group of customers, about 5 people, appeared completely normal. They were casually dressed, with nothing standing out except their serious and cold expressions. Clara couldn't ignore the strange atmosphere that settled in as they walked into the store. They quietly walked around the shop, not talking or discussing anything with each other. Clara noticed they lingered longer in front of abstract paintings, bizarre sculptures with unclear shapes, artworks that only true art enthusiasts usually took time to admire. They examined the paintings as if they were searching for something Clara couldn't comprehend. As time passed, they showed no signs of making a purchase. Clara began to feel an unsettling anxiety. These customers were not like the typical art lovers she'd met. They seemed like strangers passing through this world, not truly belonging to it. This strange feeling intensified when they approached the checkout counter. At this moment, only one man stepped up and placed a pencil on the counter. But not just any ordinary pencil. This was a very special pencil, an artwork, handcrafted and of considerable value. Clara looked at the man, and the strangeness she felt only grew stronger. The man said nothing, only quietly placed the pencil on the counter. And Clara felt a tension in the air, as if something unusual was about to happen. As Clara began to ring up the pencil, what surprised her was how the man paid. He handed her a high-denomination bill, a bill that even wealthy people rarely use in everyday transactions. Clara couldn't help but feel confused. As the man seemed indifferent to receiving change, she gave him the correct amount of change. But the bizarre thing happened when the man only stared at the bills she handed back. Without any sign of understanding, he looked at her as if he didn't know what to do with them. As if the concept of change was something he had never heard of. Things became even stranger as the group of people stood silently beside him. Observing the scene, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of unease. They did not behave like ordinary customers. They didn't ask questions, didn't inquire about the price, didn't ask about the products. They simply stared at the change Clara gave back, as if they didn't understand it. Every movement of theirs seemed like a reminder that they didn't belong to this world. As the silence stretched on, Clara couldn't take it anymore. Her heart raced, and an eerie sensation overwhelmed her. She quickly handed the change back to the man once more. But this time, he simply took it, without any reaction. A chilling coldness in his eyes made Clara feel as if she was communicating with someone from another world. Something in his gaze made her unable to stop thinking about the possibility that these people might not be human. With panic rising in her chest, Clara could no longer hesitate. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking, and immediately called her most trusted friend. She didn't know what to do. only knowing that something was terribly wrong in her store. "There are aliens in my store," Clara blurted out, and those words left a mark on her. A mark that couldn't be erased. At that moment, Clara could not have known that those words would become part of a larger, more mysterious story that she had never imagined. Her story about extraterrestrial beings passing through us, unnoticed, was just beginning. So, who were these people, and why were they behaving like this? Clara didn't know that her life would never be the same again. The mysteries would gradually unfold, and she would have to face the unexplainable. A strange truth. Time and those from the future. Time, like a river, flows and never returns. But if it could, would we dare step outside its current? Virginia Beach on a late night. The night descended. The space was silent, only the sound of waves lapping at the shore. Emily, a woman living there, had decided to take a run along the beach, a habit she had kept for years to relax her mind and relieve stress. But tonight, everything would be completely different. She ran steadily, breathing in the fresh air, looking out at the distant horizon, where only the faint glow of streetlights could be seen. Her footsteps echoed in the stillness. But suddenly, a strange movement in the space made her stop and gaze up at the night sky. The strange event began from that moment. Slicing through the night sky, a strange creature flew by like a giant manta ray, but with no tail, just a shape resembling the tail of a sea creature. In pale purple and translucent, it emitted no light, wasn't an airplane, and wasn't a flash from some distant galaxy. It was a creature that Emily could not explain. It flew very low, and a strange feeling enveloped her. She could distinctly feel that it was only about 100 yards away, an alarmingly close distance. This sensation stunned her, making it impossible to believe what she had just seen. It must be some supernatural phenomenon, something that can't be explained, Emily thought to herself, but a sense of unease spread throughout her body. She couldn't move, standing frozen, her eyes following the creature as it slowly flew across the night sky. It had no tail, no flapping wings, just a bizarre image gliding by like an odd shadow. Another strange thing was that it made no sound. It was completely silent, as if it didn't exist in the physical world she was living in. Emily started to feel not just the strangeness of that creature, but another sensation, as if she was facing something beyond the concept of space and time. At that moment, a strange thought suddenly flashed in her mind. Perhaps this oddity wasn't just an alien creature but an event that couldn't be explained, a time slip. A few days later, when recounting the story to her friends, Emily slowly realized something terrifying. Maybe the creature she saw was actually herself from the future. The so-called time slip she had once heard of as a legend was no longer just an obscure phenomenon. She, with all her confusion, had become part of it. Others also felt the same strange sensation. One of Emily's friends, after hearing the story, shared that he had experienced something similar when witnessing an inexplicable event. Something he couldn't name. Another friend of hers also recounted that when walking through the park one foggy morning, he had encountered someone walking past him, someone who looked familiar but said nothing. Months later, he met that person again under different circumstances. And this time, the person smiled as though everything had been predestined. And then Emily remembered a statement from a researcher who once mentioned the phenomenon of time synchronization, where events do not happen in a usual order but seem to shift into another dimension, where one might meet their future self, not in the present but in a different future. Emily's feeling when she saw that strange creature became more vague and harder to explain. Was that a sign that she had witnessed a moment that transcended time, where she saw herself from a future she couldn't know? This strange feeling grew stronger as Emily recalled the lifeless gaze of the creature, the way it glided across the sky, as though it were watching her from another space, a space that couldn't be touched. Certainly, this wasn't a normal phenomenon. It was a distortion of space and time, an encounter between different realities that humanity couldn't explain. The more she thought about it, the more Emily felt a sense of fear, an indescribable feeling that perhaps she had seen some aspect of herself in the future. And everything from that moment would change forever. So, did this really happen? Could time be bent to allow us to see a version of ourselves in the future, when the grand events of the universe begin to unfold before our eyes? These unanswered questions would continue to haunt Emily, And perhaps, this was only the beginning of a story she would never fully understand. A story about those who live beyond the boundaries of time. Creatures that don't belong to the world we think we understand. A strange truth awaits her. And everything will only be deciphered when she dares face herself, from the future. Events with multiple witnesses. At that moment, we just knew that we couldn't comprehend what we had just seen. And that light, it wasn't from this world. The story began on a cold night, when a group of soldiers and several civilians were moving through a desolate area. Not far from abandoned military zones. This was an area with little human traffic. But that night, something strange happened. A man named Mark recalled that he and his group were walking when a light suddenly appeared in the sky. A light unlike any he had ever seen before. The light emanated from a huge triangular object. Hovering in midair, it made no sound, but its presence seemed to make the surrounding space become still, as if time had stopped. The soldiers, despite having experienced dozens of airborne missions, had never witnessed anything like it. Mark and his group began to feel a strange sensation overcome them, as if they no longer had control over their bodies. The UFO's light was extremely bright, so bright that it made the surrounding air feel dense. A suffocating feeling spread through the space, as if the air had been sucked away, leaving an eerie void. Mark recalled, "I felt like I couldn't breathe, as if the air around me had been drained, and my heart was pounding in my chest." But the strangest thing was that this UFO moved so slowly that it almost seemed like it wasn't moving at all. However, when it began to move, everything happened incredibly fast. Immediately, the UFO sped towards the horizon at an unimaginable speed, leaving behind a beam of light so intense that it caused the surrounding air to shake. The sudden change in space left everyone in the group utterly confused, as if their senses had been bent. What was even more frightening was that not just one, but several witnesses felt a strange vibration in the air. One of the witnesses described how he felt as if an invisible frequency was infiltrating his body, creating a numb and strange sensation. It was like standing near a high-voltage power pole. That feeling, but much stronger, as if your body was being pulled into an uncontrollable force. He recalled, whether military personnel or civilians, everyone could feel the stark difference. Some began to feel disoriented, unable to determine their direction, despite being in the middle of a vast, open space. This caused the people in the group, those who were familiar with many types of aircraft and spaces, to begin feeling fear. They couldn't explain the origin of the UFO, but the strange feeling it emitted, along with the vibrations in the air, left them bewildered. An experienced military personnel in the Air Force shared, "I've been involved in many investigations into UFOs and strange phenomena, but I've never felt anything like this. The objects we've seen before were always explainable, whether military aircraft or unidentified flying objects. But this is something that can't be explained. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." Another noteworthy thing was that this UFO was not only seen by the naked eye, but it also appeared on the radar of nearby military monitoring stations. Radar operators confirmed that this object was not only large in size but also moved at a speed beyond their ability to track. Despite the usual analyses of objects in the sky, the radar couldn't follow this object throughout its movement, and the data collected were only vague signal points, as if there was an object that couldn't be caught. Military officials, after reviewing the reports, had to admit that they couldn't identify what this object was. It wasn't an airplane, it wasn't a missile, it wasn't a satellite. It was an object that our systems couldn't record accurately. And what was equally strange was that the presence of this object seemed to have a direct impact on the feelings of those who witnessed it. A civilian in the group said, "I've never felt anything like this before. This feeling wasn't just fear, but something greater, a presence, as if it was watching us, as if we were just pawns in a game we couldn't understand." After the event, the witnesses immediately reported to the military authorities, and an investigation was launched. However, the details from the investigation were kept confidential, and there has been no official conclusion about the appearance of this strange object. Nevertheless, the witnesses continued to live in confusion, unable to explain what they had seen. In the weeks that followed, the story of the UFO's appearance and the strange vibration continued to be discussed within the community. A big question arose. Had we witnessed part of a phenomenon that couldn't be understood? An encounter between humans and something from outside our world? The people who were part of this encounter would never forget the strange feeling that the UFO gave them. And they would never be able to explain its origin. An object that caused the space around them to change. An event they were certain they would never forget for the rest of their lives. From X-Files to real-world analysis. I've worked in a world where X-Files was just a fictional show. What I saw and investigated were not fictional stories. These were real events, involving soldiers, pilots, and people who had directly witnessed UFOs. These stories, though they may seem mysterious and unbelievable, have an underlying truth that we cannot ignore. Nick Pope, a legendary figure in UFO research, spent over 20 years working for the UK Ministry of Defence, investigating strange and mysterious phenomena related to unidentified flying objects. Throughout this time, he didn't just work in an office, he actually took part in some of the most famous UFO investigations that many people only know from films like X-Files. But the difference is, in Nick Pope's real world, there is no fiction. The stories he investigated were real events, where soldiers, pilots, and witnesses were not playing roles, they had truly experienced things that no one could explain. One of the most famous events Nick Pope investigated was the Rendlesham Forest incident in late 1980. This event is considered Britain's Roswell, with military personnel witnessing a massive UFO land in a forest near the Woodbridge military base. The story became legendary because of its authenticity and the number of witnesses who were trained to identify airborne threats. Some of them even recorded strange occurrences in the area after the UFO appeared. Nick Pope recalled, "When I reviewed the reports from the Rendlesham incident, I was truly astonished. These weren't tall tales. These were a series of events with real evidence, with credible witnesses." However, despite the numerous witnesses and evidence, the truth about Rendlesham still hasn't been explained. People still ask about this event. There are some questions that cannot be answered. Where did that UFO come from? Was it something man-made? That's one of the strange cases that I can't forget. These questions have haunted Nick Pope, and after years of investigation, he realized that some events simply can't be explained with current science. Fear from the unknown. Unlike science fiction movies or TV shows like X-Files, where UFO stories are just products of imagination, Nick Pope had to face the reality that these phenomena didn't just involve ordinary people, they were serious issues related to national security. While events like Rendlesham remain part of UFO folklore, Nick Pope and his colleagues knew that these incidents could affect the country's safety, especially when some of these events involved the military and national intelligence agencies. The UFO investigations I participated in involved experts and experienced soldiers. These people weren't easily deceived. They weren't dreamers. They were simply people who had witnessed a phenomenon that we can't explain. This truth terrified Nick Pope, not because of what the strange objects were, but because of the lack of transparency and information we have about them. Nick Pope shared a memorable story from when he investigated a UFO sighting by pilots from the Royal Air Force. They described how the UFO flew past them at breakneck speed. And what stunned me was, according to radar reports, this UFO didn't even show up on radar for a few seconds before reappearing and making a flyby near their fighter jets. That's something that can't be explained. The pilots and soldiers from the Ministry of Defense had witnessed UFOs capable of moving with a speed and precision that no aircraft today can replicate. This raises the question, are we witnessing the progress of a different civilization? Or are these objects part of a secret military program that we aren't allowed to know about? Science or mystical reality? Nick Pope is not the only one trying to explain these strange phenomena. As he took part in investigations, he had to face many different hypotheses, from scientific theories to mystical explanations. One of the big questions he always faced was whether UFOs could be the result of advanced military technology or if they were truly extraterrestrial objects. During his work, Nick Pope interacted with many renowned experts and researchers. One of his most memorable encounters was with physicists and astronomers about the theory behind the strange movements of UFOs. Some of these scientists believe UFOs could be the result of technology far beyond our understanding, while others think this is some form of interaction between us and extraterrestrial civilizations. Pope shared, however, One thing he couldn't deny was that there were too many unexplained events that couldn't be overlooked. Classified evidence and the silence of the government. Nick Pope recalled a time when he approached a classified file related to UFOs. This file had been hidden for many years, and when he opened it, he couldn't believe his eyes. The file contained documents describing the interaction between the British military and UFOs. Some of these documents were classified at a higher level than usual. This was one of the moments when Nick Pope felt like he was standing before a truth that the government had deliberately hidden. When dealing with these documents, Pope realized that we might have witnessed events that have never been made public. And this raises a big question: are these UFOs truly extraterrestrial objects? Or are they part of a secret military experiment we have not been told about? This drove Nick Pope to continue searching for concrete evidence. When you work with files like this, you can't simply ignore them. But at the same time, you have to face questions that you can't answer. How can we prove what's real when even government agencies don't provide us with complete information? The disappearing truth and unanswered questions. In over 20 years of work, Nick Pope investigated thousands of cases. From UFO reports on radar to direct witness accounts. From pilots to soldiers. But every time he solved one case, thousands of new questions arose. Questions that couldn't be answered. Events that couldn't be explained. Nick Pope knew that his job wasn't just about searching for the truth. It was about challenging scientific hypotheses. Seeking answers in a world where the unexplainable became part of reality. Throughout his career, he encountered many strange events, each one containing a mysterious clue that couldn't be ignored. But still, no answers. As his career continued to develop, Nick Pope became more certain that UFOs weren't just fictional stories, but part of a reality that humanity wasn't ready to face. And it seems that this denial is the scariest part of the search for the truth about UFOs. Rendlesham Forest, the legendary investigation. There's something strange about this case that, to this day, I still can't explain. The soldiers who witnessed it, those with military experience, they cannot deny what happened. We can't simply call it a light or a coincidence. What happened in this forest on Christmas night in 1980? And can we face the truth? On Christmas night in 1980, Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England, became the scene of one of the most famous UFO incidents in modern history. U.S. military personnel stationed at Raff Woodbridge, just a few steps away from the forest, witnessed an unexplainable phenomenon. The story began when a few soldiers, while on patrol, noticed a strange light in the distance, behind the forest's fence. Initially, they thought it was just the light from an airplane or a regular flare. However, as the light began to move, they realized it was something they couldn't easily explain. A strange object, with an undefined shape, glowing brightly, hovered in midair. As one soldier described, the light resembled a giant spotlight, but not a light they knew. The closer they got, the stronger and stranger the light became. It wasn't just a physical light, it also emitted a strange energy. Like an invisible pull they couldn't avoid. One of the soldiers involved in the incident, named Jim Peniston, later recounted in interviews that when he approached the object, he felt pulled toward it, unable to control his body, as if an invisible force was drawing him forward. It felt unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't a light, it wasn't an aircraft, it was something else, something unexplainable. At that moment, I lost control of my body. I couldn't stop, I just kept walking, as if some other force was controlling me. Peniston described the strange sensation. He felt that every step he took was guided by that light. And this event left a deep mark on his mind for many years. As Peniston and the other soldiers got closer to the object, what they saw became even stranger. The object not only emitted light, but it also radiated an energy that made the surrounding air feel heavy. Some soldiers began to feel anxious, as though they were being watched by an invisible force. And when they looked up, something even stranger happened. After hovering for a while, the object began to move, but it didn't move like an airplane or any usual mechanical device. It rose into the sky with unimaginable speed, then suddenly disappeared into the air. This spectacle was not just a bizarre event for the witnesses, but it also became a huge question for investigators later on. What really happened at Rendlesham Forest? The sense of confusion and bewilderment didn't end there. The witnesses began to feel as if there was a mysterious presence around them, as though they were not alone in that forest. When Peniston approached the object, he recorded a strange binary code on its surface. These characters were unexplainable, numbers he could only describe as a type of message that didn't belong to this world. In the days that followed, investigations continued. Peniston and the other soldiers, after having witnessed the event, began to share the strange experiences they had gone through. Military experts, police, and British Ministry of Defence personnel began to participate in the investigation. However, one puzzling thing was that despite the many witnesses and events proving the occurrence, the Rendlesham Forest incident still couldn't be logically explained. Even the investigators faced confusion and failure in explaining the event. Some experts suggested that the object might have been a type of experimental military aircraft. But this was quickly dismissed, as no aircraft could perform the actions that the witnesses described, like flying silently or changing speed suddenly without creating shockwaves. With the lack of solid evidence, the Rendlesham incident remains a mystery. Classified files were opened, and it was discovered that the British government had kept much of the information related to the incident secret. Nevertheless, one undeniable thing was that the soldiers who witnessed this event had consistent accounts. With no changes in what they described, the Rendlesham Forest incident was not just a typical UFO event. It was an encounter between humans and the unexplainable, a story that perhaps we are not yet ready to understand. Remaining evidence and government silence. Despite the many pieces of evidence from witnesses, such as Jim Peniston's records of the binary code, radar documents, and military reports, the British government has not provided any satisfactory explanations. This only fueled suspicions that there might be a larger cover-up taking place. When Nick Pope, who had worked for the British Ministry of Defence, joined the later investigations, he discovered that Rendlesham Forest was one of the events that the British government did not want to make public. Not just because of its nature, but also because acknowledging UFOs could have serious consequences for national security. Pope shared, "I had to deal with classified documents and saw that some information had been erased or was only partially revealed." To this day, while some continue searching for the truth about Rendlesham Forest, the mystery remains unsolved. Questions about UFOs and the presence of extraterrestrial beings continue to linger in the vastness of unresolved doubts. But one thing is undeniable. This event changed how we perceive the world around us. And what may happen beyond what we already know. Lessons from Rendlesham. An unanswered big question. The Rendlesham Forest incident is not just a UFO story, but a lesson about the limits of human knowledge. When we face the strange and unexplainable, we must accept that some mysteries will never be solved, at least not until humanity overcomes the barriers of science and technology. And it is stories like these, though strange and hard to believe, that drive researchers and truth seekers to continue their journey. The biggest question from Rendlesham remains: are we living in a world full of unexplained mysteries? Or is it simply that we are not yet capable of understanding what is happening around us? Strange phenomena related to UFOs. Time doesn't just flow the way we think. There are moments when the boundaries between space and time seem to tear apart, opening strange gaps that we cannot explain. Throughout his long journey of UFO research, Nick Pope has witnessed many strange and unusual events that even he struggled to explain. But there is one phenomenon that he found in numerous witness reports that made him reflect more deeply: time being torn apart. The time gap. UFO witnesses, after experiencing strange events, frequently report losing time, a phenomenon they cannot explain. This feeling isn't just a loss of time, it's a disruption in their own reality. An unusually long period of time seems to have been erased from their memory, leaving a vague gap that no one can fill. One of the standout stories is from a witness in northern England. This person had an encounter with a flying saucer UFO. As its light illuminated a desolate forest on a dark night, he recalled that when the light shone down and the UFO hovered above, suddenly, time seemed to stop. It felt strange, as if I was pulled into a crack in space and time. One moment I was standing there, and the next I realized hours had passed that I couldn't remember. He shared, all he knew was that after the event, when he returned to where he had been standing, He couldn't pinpoint exactly how much time had passed since he left. He only remembered being there, but there was no change in the timeline that he could perceive. A feeling outside of time. Another phenomenon that UFO witnesses experience is the feeling of being outside of time. They describe experiences in which they feel as if they've stepped out of the natural flow of time. This often happens during close encounters when they are facing unidentified flying objects. There are cases where witnesses cannot accurately determine how much time has passed, feeling like an hour, but in reality, it might have been an entire day or even longer. What they saw was not just a sight from outer space but also a crack in the very concept of human time. Seeing oneself from the future. One of the strangest reports Nick Pope ever received was about a phenomenon called time slip, crossing time. These witnesses not only lost time, but they also reported seeing themselves from the future. One man, while driving home after a late shift, saw a strange light in the sky. He described the UFO as resembling a flying saucer, and its light emitted an energy that immediately mesmerized him. As he followed it, he suddenly felt dizzy, and everything around him became blurry. When the UFO vanished, he realized that a long period of time had passed, but he couldn't remember what he had done during that time. The next morning, he woke up and went to work as usual, but something strange happened. He met a woman he had never seen before. But when she looked into his eyes, she seemed very surprised, as if she had met him before. She even called him a name he didn't recognize. "Aren't you the person I met yesterday?" The question left him stunned. As he continued his everyday life, he began to notice strange details happening. Conversations with coworkers he didn't remember having. Little details of life he had forgotten, but they appeared strangely as if they had happened before. He gradually realized a perplexing truth. He was living in a time loop. And he had seen himself from the future. A bigger question: is time and space controlled by extraterrestrial beings? These phenomena, though hard to explain, raise a big question about reality and how we understand it. Time, traditionally thought of as a continuous flow that we cannot change, might be a structure that can be altered or infringed upon. And if so, could extraterrestrial beings, with their ability to travel between planets, also have the power to manipulate time? Nick Pope and many other UFO researchers began to realize that UFOs and the strange phenomena related to them are not just encounters from outer space, but may also be encounters with the very boundaries of time and space. Perhaps extraterrestrial beings not only control space but also have the ability to alter time, creating rifts in its natural flow, decoding unusual phenomena. Scientists are still continuing to study and try to explain these strange phenomena. However, every time these phenomena appear, they raise questions that cannot be answered. Time, or rather the experience of it, is becoming an important part of UFO research. And UFO researchers are searching for answers to the question: if UFOs can make us lose time, can they also change the flow of time and space? It's certain that these stories will continue to captivate researchers and mystery enthusiasts exploring UFOs in the coming years. There are still many unsolved mysteries, but it is precisely these strange phenomena that continue to spark our imagination, while opening the door to a world we've never dared to consider. Could it be that one day, we will understand that all of this is just a part of the vast universe we have yet to fully explore? Time and future phenomena. Messages from the future. From extraterrestrial beings. Could they be real or just psychological games that we cannot yet explain? As UFO witnesses continue to share their stories of strange experiences, one increasingly prominent topic is the messages they receive from unidentified flying objects, UFOs. These messages are not merely vague signs or blurry images, but are downloads of information in a clear manner, often during states where they cannot control themselves, and are frequently accompanied by a strange sensation of time and space. Mysterious messages from extraterrestrial beings. One of the witnesses recounted that when he approached a giant UFO hovering in the sky on a dark night, he suddenly felt a strong sense of compulsion, as though some stream of information was downloading into his mind. He described that this information wasn't a voice or an image, but rather a direct data encoding into his mind, including images, sounds, and feelings that he could not explain. Another person, during a close encounter with a UFO, said he felt a strange connection with the object, as though there was a space-time link between him and the UFO. According to him, when he interacted with it, he felt as if he no longer belonged to time as he knew it. He said, "I didn't just see that UFO, I felt it in my mind, as if I was receiving a message from my own future." These messages are often not specific or easily understood, but they cause a profound change in the minds of the witnesses. Some describe them as predictions, warnings about the future or humanity's transformation, while others believe they are messages related to the existence of other civilizations, or the space-time rules we still cannot fully comprehend. Stranger still, psychological manipulation or unexplained truth. The important question many people ask is, could these messages be a form of psychological manipulation? A kind of mind control from extraterrestrial beings? Or are they truly messages from a world beyond our understanding? A world we have never dared to imagine? Some UFO researchers believe that experiences like this could be psychological manipulation, born out of interactions between humans and extraterrestrial forces. According to this theory, UFOs are not just flying objects, but could be tools designed to manipulate the mind, creating vague sensations and messages that humans cannot verify. Those affected by these messages may experience them in a semi-conscious state, where time and space become fluid, leading them to believe they are receiving information from a source outside their world. However, some believe that these messages are truly meaningful and carry a deep message about humanity's existence in the vast universe. These stories lead many to question the truth behind UFO phenomena, and whether one day, we will understand that we are just a part of a world far greater than we can imagine. Time and space. Can we perceive their change? One of the interesting elements related to UFO messages is the change in how witnesses perceive time and space. Strange phenomena like time being torn apart, lost time, or the feeling that time doesn't pass in the usual way, often appear in UFO witness reports. Could this be a sign that we are facing phenomena beyond what we know about the universe? In some cases, UFO witnesses have described time zones being disrupted, where time doesn't flow normally, causing them to lose their sense of time and space. They might feel as if they've entered a different reality, where nothing happens according to the rules we know. These experiences are often described as gaps in the timeline, and could suggest that time and space may not be as rigid as we believe. Messages from the future. Are we receiving signals from another world? Some UFO witnesses have believed that they are not just receiving messages from extraterrestrial existence, but also from their future selves. Could extraterrestrial beings not only travel between planets but also across different periods in history? Some reports have described witnesses seeing themselves from the future, or receiving messages related to the future, sent from another world where time is no longer a continuous flow. These messages are not just about the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations, but also about changes within humanity itself, the transition from an organic life form to a species that can control time, space, and even the future. Ongoing research continues to raise the question, are we really receiving messages from the future? Or is it all just psychological effects from extraterrestrial beings trying to make us believe in something we can't understand? The final question. Are we at a significant point in the universe? While the answers to these questions remain beyond our understanding, these strange events and phenomena continue to challenge human intellect and our understanding of the universe. Could UFO messages be a form of communication from extraterrestrial beings? Or are they just fragments of the human mind, part of our incomplete evolution? The story of UFOs and the strange messages from them will continue to raise big questions. Are extraterrestrial beings showing us a future we cannot yet imagine? Are we receiving messages from our own future, from a reality that we have yet to fully explore? Perhaps one day, we will discover that everything we've ever known about time, space, and the universe is just the beginning of a vast picture we have only started to see.